Hello and welcome into the RotoWire Esports Show. I am Andrew Laird, joined by Ethan Sexton again. Ethan, we are on day 2 of the LPL season. Day 1 went exactly as we expected. EDG, OMG went 1-2-1, and Suning beat TES just like we thought.
Yeah, no, we could take partial credit, right? Like we said, OMG would take a game from EDG, and hey, we're right there, so we're claiming victory right now. Too little faith in Suning, and in hindsight, I kind of said yesterday how it was kind of stupid to think that OMG had the better shot of upsetting on today's slate, but with Suning being the runner-up at Worlds, but just proved to be too little faith in Suning and too much faith in top esports. But what can you do? That happens, and we move on to tomorrow.
Do you think Suning just owns top esports?
It looks that way right now. I mean, I don't know. They just really dominated both games. So yeah, it really looks that way right now, and we'll have to see how top esports plays going forward. But they were so good in the preseason Demacia Cup that I really didn't have a lot of concerns about them. But Suning really stomped them, so that happens though.
Yeah, that happens. So the Sunday slate is much different than what we had for the Saturday. Saturday we had these two big favorites. There is one big favorite. Team WE, big favorite over Rogue Warriors, but not as big as what we saw on the 2 Saturdays. And then the game that I think is actually going to be the most interesting, JDG and Invictus Gaming. Supposed to be close. JDG's slight favorite, but I think you could make arguments that can go either way.
Yep.
Sure. The pricing feels a lot looser. Yesterday we were talking about everybody's going to want to jam the favorites in. Everybody did in cash. It's funny, TES lost, and if you had them in cash, you were perfectly fine because basically everybody had them. But the Sunday slate, I think, is a lot more interesting in terms of actual lineup builds because you can almost play not whatever you want, but almost whatever you want. Particularly just because Rogue Warriors are so much cheaper, but even as the biggest favorite, WE's still not even that expensive. So it's certainly a nice multi. I mean, it's probably every slate is a fun multi-entry slate, but there are definitely different ways you can go to get all of them in, as opposed to just I'm just going to anchor this one team and see what's going on. So where do you think people go?
Yeah, for sure. So if we look at the two matchups a little bit, like you mentioned, WE are big favorites on this slate against Rogue Warriors, and I think they deserve to be. I think they've got a really good team. They're bringing back 3 core pieces of the team from last year: Beisheng, the jungler, Jumeng, the AD carry, and missing the support. Those are 3 really good players that have been on WE and are coming back this year. They're really top players in the league, really a solid core for that team. And then they brought in Breathe here. I think it's Breathe or Breath. Either way, he changed his name. Formerly Curse, who was on OMG last year, and he had a really good season as a top laner for OMG last year. And then the other change that they're making for tomorrow is one that a lot of people wanted to see last season. Was they're taking Teacher Ma out, and they're bringing in this guy Shanks, who was a highly regarded player from their academy setup, and he never really got any playing time last year, even though Teacher Ma was kind of he could only play a couple of champions, and he wasn't necessarily the best player. So I really do think that they're deserving to be big favorites tomorrow. Rogue Warriors have a lineup that I thought had some potential upside, but with Wuji stepping down, they're really missing a guy who was one of the key components to their roster, and a guy who looked like he was going to be one of the next great AD carries in the league. So with him gone, I'm really not as excited about Rogue Warriors. So I really like Team WE tomorrow. I just think that lineup's really good, one that should be in the playoffs and fighting towards a title. And, I think they're probably going to 2-0 if I had to guess, and I think they have a really good shot of doing that tomorrow.
I think one of my best finishes last year was with Teacher Ma in it, and so I have this soft spot.
Yep.
So not having that available is probably saving me from myself.
Well, if the team does well, even though he's maybe subpar compared to some other mid laners in the league, if the team's doing well, he's still going to do well as a benefactor of that. So But I think what people are excited about is Shanks is a better mechanical player, is what we've been told, for the last year and a half. So, and Teacher Ma was, like I said, kind of a guy that just plays a couple of champions and doesn't have a ton of individual upside. So, I think it might end up being an improvement to an already good team.
All right, that's fair. So this other game is going to be very close, we expect. I think the general thought is that it could go 2-1 either way. I think a sweep would be more surprising than 2-1 either way.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on a game stack?
Oh, man. So it is definitely a way you could go, and I haven't toyed with it personally, but I think you could probably fit it in because they're so similarly priced, but yet neither one is the top priced play on the day. Excuse me. So it is something you could do. I'm not a huge game stack guy, and that's not to say that it couldn't work, but I feel like it kind of limits upside because one of the teams is only going to win one game, and if you don't get high kill total games in all 3 games, whichever team loses, say they get only single-digit kills in the 2 games they lose, they're not going to have that upside. Whereas if you can fit in one of these teams that you think is going to win with a team like WE, who we think are going to 2-0, I just think that you have way more upside that way. That's not to say that a game stack couldn't and hasn't worked on slates in the past, but to me it's just something I don't normally like to do because I just think there's a lot more unnecessary kind of risk involved. JDG typically aren't a team that, blow the doors off in losses. So saying that it could certainly happen tomorrow, what probably will now, we've spoken it into existence. It definitely could happen, but on the flip side, IG are this team that is aggressive no matter what, winning or losing, which could result in higher kill total games. But the way I'm kind of leaning is I really actually like Invictus Gaming tomorrow to upset. It's a small upset, but to upset JDG. And the main reason for that is JDG is going to be starting a GA in the mid lane over Yagao. I think Yagao's a better player. They're both kind of veteran guys. GA's been around for a long time, but I've often thought the last couple of years that Yagao was just a better player, and I'm a little confused why they're doing it because, they're bringing the rest of their team back completely, and Yagao still is on the roster, but he's just not going to start tomorrow's series. And I do think it's a small downgrade. And, when you're looking at playing against Invictus Gaming, their 2 best players are Rookie in the mid lane, who's just an outstanding player, and then the Shy in the top lane, who coming into last season was arguably one of the best players in the world, and then he kind of had this up and down, peaks and valleys season, which went hand in hand with how Invictus Gaming played last year. But if he's on, he's an incredible player as well. So I really kind of do like Invictus Gaming tomorrow to small upset JDG. Like you're saying, we're most likely looking at a 2-1 either way. So it's going to be a close series. You can definitely play either side. JDG are still a really good team with 4 out of the 5 guys they brought back from their roster that made Worlds last year. But I do think, I really like IG, and the other main reason is I think they've upgraded a couple pieces. So they have a new jungler who's a solid up-and-coming jungler from the LDL, which is the development league in China. And then they brought in Wink from eStar, who was really talented as an AD carry last year. When eStar were going strong, it was really on the back of a lot of his performances. And I think he's a big upgrade over Puff. So I really like this Invictus Gaming lineup, and I think they've got a really good shot at an upset tomorrow. And you can get them in there with WE, and I think that's a good way to build a lineup.
So obviously we know that IG can put up a bunch of fantasy points. Do you see them, would you be more comfortable using them as the 4 of a 4-3 stack? Or would you just play it safer with WE?
To me, because of the way I'm thinking with WE is likely to sweep, and that's what I expect to happen, I'd look to go 4 WE just because you get that games not played bonus on 4 people. Potentially, it could be... One other thing I would look at, though, is, you could do a 3-3 and then have WE as the team spot, and then the team spot getting a sweep is a huge games not played multiplier as well. So you could go that route, especially because, although we think Shanks is going to be a pretty good player, you're probably looking at wanting to get Rookie in your lineup as your mid laner if you don't go with him as the captain and play 2 mid laners. So, you can really build kind of a nice 3-3 if you want to go that way, without giving out too much straight up lineup, reveal here. That's kind of a way you could look as well. And then, you get the WE team in there, and if they get that games not played bonus, that's potentially going to be a big upgrade on a team that goes 2-1.
Yeah. So I don't think you can pull off a WE JDG lineup with an AD carry captain. Like Jumeng doesn't. I don't think it fits.
Right.
It does with IG. If you use like your captain as like if you go into the slate like this is the guy that I want to captain and I'm just gonna like build from there. Who's the guy that we should be focusing on?
So the way I'm building, I've kind of revealed, I guess, a lot of things here, but the way I'm building, I'm looking at Jumeng as my captain, primarily because I think he's a really great AD carry, so he's a carry player that you can fit in the captain spot, and also I think, like I said, with WE expected to 2-0, you're going to get that games not played multiplier on him, plus the 1.5 on that, so it's even more points from the GNP bonus. So I'm kind of looking at him as my captain. We can go a couple different ways. He might be pretty popular at the end of the day, so we'll have to see how people do their builds. I think if you go more for a WE JDG and you can't quite fit the carries in there the way you want to, a guy like Kanavi, even as a jungler, in the past he's been a big-time carry jungler. He plays a lot of carry champions, so he's never a bad person to look to at the captain spot as well.
It's funny. I feel like this. When I first saw the lineups, I was like, this could be like a double jungler slate that like maybe if you needed to go that way, like this seems like a slate you'd be more comfortable with.
Yep.
But then when I finally like looked at the pricing in terms of like who I should get in for the 80 carrier mids, I'm like, oh, you don't need it. Like it's almost like it's a way to differentiate, but I actually think you're probably just putting yourself behind because everybody else can fit in the 80 carrier mid captains.
Yep. I would say, it wouldn't shock me, though, if JDG end up winning, if Kanavi, as a captain, is a viable route to winning a tournament. Just because, like you said, he might be lower owned because he can fit carries in the spots, and just because in the past, he's played a lot of carry champions and been a high point kind of jungler that is viable to use in the captain spot. So it wouldn't shock me if that happened. I don't think it's, to throw out the word optimal, I still think it's more optimal to try to get a mid laner or an AD carry in that carry spot whenever you can. But, if you're forced to go a jungler and it's Kanavi in the captain spot, it's not a bad thing because he can play those carry picks that can get high point totals as well.
Yeah. That's anytime he's on the slate, it's one of those like, oh, maybe it's like, you don't feel quite as bad on the downgrade.
Yep, exactly. So he's not one of those junglers that just plays like a more supportive champion and tries to pile up assists. He's a bit more aggressive and gets a lot more kills on average than most of the other junglers. So he's viable. He's not a bad way to go if you got to go that way. I wouldn't feel bad about it, like we're saying.
Okay. How does Rogue Warriors win?
They don't. I really don't see it. Unfortunately, if they had Zwuji in, I'd give them more of a shot. They're playing this guy Kellen in their 80 carry spot. He's coming up from their academy roster. And I don't know a lot about him, to be honest, but it doesn't, it just doesn't make me think that they have as much upside as they would with Zwuji. They brought a couple other players in, like Ziv from AHQ in the Taiwanese league, and he's a pretty good player, honestly, but I don't know if he's going to make a difference right away in China. But then the rest of their team just isn't that exciting. Like, their jungler Forge is just kind of their mid laner Forge is just kind of an average player, and their jungler Haro was one of the worst junglers in the league 2 years ago. He got benched to start the season last year, and then when he came back, he was actually really good. But, who's to say, does that form carry over? I don't know. We'll have to see going forward with them in some easier matchups. But for tomorrow, maybe I'm too high on this WE team, but for tomorrow, I just don't see a way that they're going to take them out, especially with, like I said, losing Zwuji is a huge loss for that team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to just be a bunch of WE, JDG, or WE, IG stacks.
Yep, sure.
Which obviously leaves Rogue Warriors as today's Suning.
Yep.
That everybody's
But they're
ignoring.
a way worse team. So it's it's going to be even harder on them. But yeah, if people are playing multiple entries, sprinkle some in because these upsets can happen, especially early in the season, like we kind of alluded to yesterday. So now's the time to kind of take a shot on these guys. And nobody really knows what we're going to get because these teams haven't played a lot yet. And upsets happen, so it's not a bad thing to sprinkle a little in. They're going to be really low owned. They'll be by far the lowest owned team, so it's worth taking a look at if you want, to differentiate your lineups completely.
Yeah, it's one of those that like when a team brings in new players, you're kind of like, oh, you don't know what the uncertainty, but like it's certainly possible that they all click immediately. They're just like, oh, that's actually what they needed. So I guess we shouldn't throw off like new teams just completely.
Yep.
All right. Anyone else?
No, I think we kind of hit on everything else. So
cool.
We'll see what happens. Hopefully, better results for us tomorrow.
I mean, today turned out to be fine, just because TES was so highly on. It was kind of I don't want to call it a bailout, but if we're all wrong together, then we're not so bad. All right. If you like these videos that Ethan and I are doing, if you could just hit the like button below, feel free to subscribe to get all of the RotoWire content. There is also just a regular YouTube playlist for all of the esports stuff that we're doing. So, Ethan, thanks for that, and good luck.
All right. You too, Andrew. Thanks.